Now we've got audio. You can see here, right? So I haven't really shown you this.
What do I see?
So
When it comes on, that's
this
us.
thing right here, that's the audio feed. And so
Okay. I got it.
you can't go much higher before once it goes into red, you're peaking and stuff.
Yeah.
We got that pretty high. So now actually kind of reset this up so it will be a little bit easier. And look at that. We're live.
So this time without my hat and with your hat.
Yes.
That's
I'm gonna wear my
Mike.
hat because it's one of those things that people recognize me for. So why not?
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to this edition of Catch the Vision. We're your hosts. My name is Mike Cornwell, and this is John Trimble. And this is a leadership podcast that we're trying to fill the leadership vacuum by inspiring you to catch the vision. So what are we talking about today, John?
I knew he was going to do that.
I'm going to do it every time.
I knew you were going to do that. Throwing it right back to you.
Yeah.
No, I think that we might get into a little more content about certain things about leaders.
Yeah.
And that may be the reason why there is such a vacuum that we've been talking about. I did hear from a couple people that are watching the broadcast, the podcast, and they said they love it. They're talking on the topic they're interested in. I thought that was interesting because we haven't really gotten into any specific, exact content and deal with that.
Yeah, sure.
But we can some aspects of leadership and what they're like, integrity and humble, et cetera, and accountable. But I still kind of feel like we can explore a little bit of this vacuum that exists today right here in River City. You know what I mean? Not far away. I mean, it exists all over the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, the nation's without a leader right now. So.
Well, I mean, for sure. I mean, I definitely said that last time. I see it very regularly. It's like I told you last week that I see management more than I see anything else, which is not leadership, but the people who...
The difference being...
What's
management
that?
and leadership.
You want me to
explain that because some don't catch that.
So the big difference between management and leadership is I'm first going to say why I think people get it mistaken, and I think the reason why they get it mistaken is two reasons. One, when they go out into the job environment or something like that, or really they go to any organization, they go to a school, they go to a church, they go to any of that kind of stuff. The word leadership is thrown around to be basically anybody who is in the organization that is higher up than you. And so that's what leadership means. That's how oftentimes even well-meaning people in an organization will just kind of say we got to go ask leadership, whatever the heck that means. And that is in almost every single scenario, that means some manager. We got to go ask a manager who makes decisions. And
even a CEO is the main manager.
Correct. The more that I've gotten into business ownership and owning a business, the more I realize that there's a fundamental difference between a business owner and, for example, a CEO, or even like a founder versus a CEO. So a founder could be a founder CEO, but oftentimes the founder leaves. The founder is always a leader. They're always a leader. You can't found anything unless you're a leader. But the being a CEO doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader. You are definitely the head manager, for sure. So that's kind of the first one. The second reason, which is actually I think 10 times more insidious, is the most organizations at this point, the founder or the primary leaders, they're all gone, and they're now just this self-running system. They've been set up in a particular kind of way, and so now they're running on autopilot. And what it means is when a person wonders where the leader is, they're only seeing the artifact that the leader left behind, but everybody else there is like captive in the system. So they literally can't know or see anybody.
A technique, what they got to keep maintaining, that's basically it.
Yeah. And so kind of the quasi of those two is oftentimes corporations in particular. They're probably the worst offenders of this. They will blend the two together, and they will just basically say, if you're a manager, you have to be a leader, which is just bad. That's just not true, because some people might be a technical manager. That, in what I would call a technical manager, is somebody doing like Gantt charts. I mentioned that before. Some sort of thing where they're using tools and they're measuring in certain kinds of ways, but that doesn't mean they're a leader. That just means that they're measuring things.
I hear that. I think leaders are, well, we got a vacuum, so they're few and far between. But you remember, I'll paraphrase something Jesus said, in the world of the Gentiles, they have certain ones that they set up that lord over you. And he said, that will not be with you. And he was talking about the kingdom of God, of course.
Yeah.
But he was also explaining that a leader is like a shepherd, a little more contact with the flock.
Yep.
Has much more of an interest in the flock as a shepherd or a father than a manager would have.
Yes.
Manager's just trying to fulfill the role. But
they might be shepherding a process, which again, that is not leadership. That's about a thing.
No, don't. Yeah, that's right. I think that's important. There are shepherds shepherding a method, a process, a technique, but that's not really leadership.
No, that's really not.
And I think we need to share about that, because if anybody's paying attention and they see a vacuum, sometimes they say, well, what vacuum? And then they realize what we're saying and go, yes, now I see it.
Yeah, you literally don't know. I mean, I've heard that term probably since I've been 18 years old about this leadership vacuum thing. But it is not, again, it's until you realize, when I do things, other people are impacted. Their behavior, whether they exhibit the behavior or they don't, is a reflection of my own. Therefore, if they're not doing those things, well, there's a vacuum going on. You can't know that until you know those things. Then you can see it kind of everywhere.
Yeah, I think so. So, in keeping with that, in that we're being listened to some degree, I think that we need to define even maybe a little bit more a leader, like I was saying, like you were saying, that's more of a shepherd of people, leading people, than just a technique or a method.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they call them Methodists. They're doing a method. You know, and I'm not trying to pastor a method. I've never been good at that. But take the lead, and people have to follow or not. Yes, I think that's more important. Even though you may not like the leader. I mean, I've been liked and not liked, loved and not loved, hated even. But I still said, well, I have to lead. I have to do what's true to me and what's true for the group. But not a leader that maintained I wasn't a really good company man. You know, when you're a company man, the company rules.
Yeah.
And I never agree to that, because the company's not there in the nitty gritty when a bad thing happens.
No, definitely not.
Or whatever. So, yeah, I think that definition is important to people. On that topic as well, I don't like to deal much with managers, but what you said about managers is true. They're just kind of maintaining a method or a set principle of how they want it done, or the founder wants it done, but the founder left, the father left.
Yes.
You know, and I think it's interesting because we're in the world of denominations. We even have Christians talking about heaven and hell when Jesus didn't talk about heaven and hell. Get Jesus so you won't burn in hell. No one ever said that.
Yeah.
He said, I'm the way to the Father. The big difference. That's a big difference. I mean, yes, thank God he brings us away from hell and toward him, but that's not the goal. The goal is not to get saved. You know, I don't see it that way. I think our shepherd, Jesus, said, I'm the way to the Father. And no one gets to the Father but by me. That's leadership. He maintained that. He stayed with that all the time and got that across. And we turned it into a method. Well, if you get him, you get the blessing of heaven. You know, if you accept him in a certain way. And so we're talking about ways of getting there. And Jesus is saying, I'm the way. And there's a difference between a leader who's the way and the method, the managers that have tried to narrow it down to some kind of religious context or method or technique. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm thinking about as far as leadership goes. He has to be our example. I don't know any better example.
No. I mean, it's kind of funny. This is sort of tangential, but this conversation kind of reminds me of it, that people, there's kind of like this mimicking nature that inevitably happens with not just leadership per se, but just people, that they'll mimic somebody. And one of the things that
Oh, yes.
what you can see is a leader will do something for a particular reason, and oftentimes we'll say the method or the techniques unveil themselves as you go. And then what you then find is people later do an analysis of what's happening, and then they'll coin it and all this kind of stuff, and then they'll go apply that very blindly, failing to realize that that was actually within a particular context. And that's always gone. The context is always lost whenever this stuff is like being passed on of do this technique, do that technique. And that just is across the board in any particular kind of thing. We were talking about that, I think, actually last time.
Yeah,
we were talking about like Calvinism and stuff. Like there was a set time, and so you do that technique during that time, but now's not that time or whatever. Yep. It's a very similar kind of thing, and the techniques are just tools.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because Paul said, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ," and his knowledge of Christ, he wanted to mimic Christ as I am of Christ, he said. He wanted to mimic him, but I've seen leaders come out of set groups or whatever, and they're acting just exactly like the leader. They hold his hand the same way, they cut their hair the same way, they dress the same way, and they're mimicking him.
Yeah.
But they're not really a leader. They're just converted.
Yeah.
More than they are led. And I think that's important to note. Some people have to be... I mean, when you share stuff like this, to me, some stuff that we say has to reveal, so that when someone looks at someone, they go, he said that I can see that happening. He said that someone's going to mimic a leader.
Yeah.
And I can see that all he ever does is exactly the same thing as the leader does. He's not necessarily going with him, but he just wants to be like him. And that's a little bit diversion from, if the leader is true, he would not allow that. He would say, hey, I made you this way. I didn't make you me. You're not me. You're you. And you have to find your way. In my leading, while I'm leading you, you have to find your way in that leading. Not mimic and turn into and imitate a certain leader, except to imitate the way that he's going, not just what he's doing. And that's hard to understand, because a lot of people know the works of God, but they don't know the way of God. It's one thing how does he do it? That's his way. What did he do? He parted the sea. But how did he do it? We need to know his way and why. And suddenly, it changes. What he did was great, but the way God... Some people know the actions of God, don't know the ways of God. And that's the same thing with leadership, in my view, as I see it. If you catch the way of where we're going, which reminds me of another thing, a leader can't just teach someone. They have to impart. You have to catch it. If you catch it, you can go with it. Teaching is great, but all you got is an educated conversion, but you don't really have someone that caught the way of this leader.
Well, it's, to this point, I'd say one of the things that is a frustrating, or can be a frustrating experience trying to lead people, is when you, the process of showing somebody something and then them basically taking it on and being able to fully delegate those activities. And as a doer type, I've run into that many times, especially a very, we'll say, high-functioning doer, that handing off tasks is ever more important, because there's no end to the amount of stuff that actually needs to get accomplished. and certain things literally can't be accomplished unless other things are taken care of, like some of the higher level things. And for sure, I've experienced many times in frustration trying to, you teach somebody something and then they're it's like a robot. Like a robot, you program it, you tell it to do the thing, and it keeps doing it. It doesn't even know anything about what it's doing. When it's like bad, it's like just a factory that just keeps going without actually. You get what I mean? Like where?
Yeah, I think that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Somebody said
it's like an automaton when it's like no. I'm showing you this thing, and now you need to start paying attention to the thing so that you can like change what you're doing in real time to like mesh what's actually happening, not just blindly doing things.
Yeah, I think that's important because I think people can imitate exactly what they were programmed to do, like a robot. But when you say, why did you do that? Well, I know the leader would not do that. That's why I'm not doing it. That's a difference from being programmed.
Yeah.
He knows the leader. He knows the way of that leader, not just the actions of the leader.
So let's get into like a practical thing. So how does one do that? How does one get that result?
Well, that's a good one because I think we didn't get into some of these things that I mentioned to you, but we have to have a connection, a communication. Leaders have to communicate, and the people have to communicate with the leader, connect with the leader. Connect and communication are kind of the same. If you connect with me, you don't communicate. It doesn't make any sense. So connection and communication, go together. And if there isn't that connection and that communication, you can't be caught doing something. And they go, "Why are you doing it?" Because he told me to. No, he didn't. He didn't tell you to do that. How do you know you should do that? Because I know him. That's the difference. I caught what this guy is after, as opposed to I was told I have to do this. You follow what I mean? So I think, practically speaking, there are certain things we need to do that we're told to do. That's fine. We should do this. We should pray more and pray alone with God. But we're doing it, and someone might ask you, well, "Why are you doing that? Everywhere you go, you're praying. You're in a tree, you're praying. You're playing, you're praying." Why? Because I know the leader does this. I caught this thing. He's saying, wherever you are, pray. It doesn't mean it is an exact automaton response of what he told them to do, but they have to catch by communication and connection what this guy is about. And I think that's the leadership vacuum, because I think a lot of leaders are afraid for people to find out what they're all about. That's another factor that we could get into. But there are leaders that are insecure. And if they would let anybody know that they're insecure, they would get rid of me. They would fire me, whatever the case may be. And that's bad too, because now you're insecure. I dealt with a lot of insecure leaders that did not want anyone to know that they were insecure. That was out of the question. No matter what they did, they had to look secure in it. And that was a cover-up. It wasn't true. And they were weak in that area. And that causes weak leadership, because now, not only are they insecure, they're afraid of being exposed.
Yeah.
And we're all...
Well, I think that brings back the therefore the so what is, if people were to be following that person, they are conveying that other people should do the same thing. Like people will inevitably do the same thing.
Oh, they will.
And that's probably, I think it's probably fair to say that might be more of a base behavior, as in that's probably more of a normal behavior, but it would be better to have the situation in which that wasn't the case. And that would be something that also leadership would be conveying. As in, like, I am secure. Yeah. And one of those things I've certainly seen is, I think it's pretty commonly said, is things like the desire that, you have to talk, you have to control, you have to share your opinion on, like, every single thing. Like, that is a perfect sign.
Your finger of every pie.
Yep.
and make sure you put my name on the board that says I'm the pastor. And so suddenly you're insecure. Suddenly there's something wrong. Do you really need that? Oh, yes, I need that. Well, he wouldn't say that. He would say, well, the people need to know who I am. Oh, like they can't tell?
Yeah. But it's funny. I mean, it's funny hearing that because I am, in a lot of ways, I'm an invisible leader. It's the only way to describe it. And
Yeah.
I am the kind of person that is much more inclined to do the work behind the scenes and let other. I'm very content to have, some faux leader that everybody sees as that and influence behind the scenes, because I know what happens. For example, because we're talking about I'm speaking very specifically of how an organization has the titles and how everybody whatever, and I know that people for some reason see the person who's got some particular title in a certain kind of way, and it conveys extra powers beyond the normal thing. But on the same token, those roles have certain kinds of life experiences that can actually take away from doing the real job of a leader.
Yeah.
I.e., like administration roles and things like that, where you're in the minutia of operations and this and that, and that's very different than going and motivating, inspiring, strategizing, seeing where people are, okay, where's the front, where's the back, those kinds of things. And so I have found that I know for a fact it's personality driven, temperament driven, that I'm much more likely, earlier this week, for example, there was a guy, our normal, we'll call him a process manager. I'm not going to get into all the technicals because it doesn't matter, but he's like a process manager, and he normally runs all the meetings. And he runs kind of he manages the workloads every week or whatever. And he was gone for whatever reason, and we're in a meeting, and all of a sudden it's somebody needs to step up. I'm not going to do that. I'm very content and perfectly fine not to run a meeting. One, that's not my strength, and then two, there will be somebody who's going to do it. And of course, this other person went and, ran the meeting. I don't care. Because if anything, I want to spend more time seeing what's going on and listening to people, not running some process. So that's one of the ways that I know that I'm not a great manager, because that's not my natural skill.
This brings me to this idea about a true leader is not worried about what I might call figureheads, making decisions. He even sent the 70 out to go preach the gospel and heal the sick, and they all did it differently. Yeah. And he was not worried about that. He didn't say, that's right, well, if I send you out, you might really be great, and I know you better than me. There was no insecurity there. There was no worry that someone, if they knew him, he said, you know me, go and do likewise. Go out there. So he allowed them to go without insecurity that he might get lost, or that he might get misunderstood, or that he might be replaced by a greater, better. It's interesting. Jesus said, you'll do my works, and greater will you do. Well, Jesus, what if we do greater than you? We'll be greater than you. Won't we be known as greater? And he's not insecure about that. That's a powerful thing about a leader. He's not insecure about others having decision-making power within the framework of this group. I think that's another thing that we need to remember. Like you're saying, you don't have to run the meeting. You might be the leader, the CEO. You don't care. They're doing fine with that. That's the nuts and bolts. Let them do that, because they know that where I'm going, and that makes a difference. Because now, and on the other side, they don't feel like they're being lorded over or controlled. And I get a limit. Well, I'd like to say this, but let me ask the CEO first. Let me ask the leader first. Yeah, that would be bad, because now we're going, well, don't you trust yourself? Don't you have that vision? Haven't you caught the idea? See, it's both ways. He's not insecure, and they're not insecure. And so suddenly there is a happiness, I call it, of security, which is one of the basic things of man, is having security. Yeah. That's a basic reality that they need is some kind of security in what they're involved in. Some kind. That can be talked about a lot too, but some have no security.
I'm just thinking about how true this is and how ridiculous it is for some people, because some people, they feel insecure that there might be some person that they don't like who might do bad things thousands of miles away from them.
And they're leading. they're like have some kind of title, and they're upset about it. Well, how can he's a bad person. How can you let him? Oh, Jesus had 12. One of them was Judas.
Yeah.
Jesus had 12, and one of them was stupid Peter, doubting Thomas.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to have, the leader's got to have a security that says, God called me to do. And by the way, I think leadership is divine appointment. I think it's a special gift from God, because you can't be a leader without it. I don't know that you can. I haven't seen leaders without a gifting from God, as far as I'm concerned. Now, some people may say, "Well, he's the leader just out of business, and he made this company. He's a billionaire." Well, yeah, but there was a gifting there somewhere. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of gifting can happen in the natural form of things,
I think maybe so. Maybe I would take a nuance on that is at certain levels, I think that's true. At like the small level, I don't think it's true. In the sense of like, I believe everybody can influence everybody, and I know that's the case. And if that's the case, then it must be the case that everybody has the potential for some sort of level of leadership abilities. Literally getting somebody to go take the trash out is leadership abilities. Now, whether or not that fits into I'm trying to remember what term you used, like, I don't know, it was like 2 weeks ago about this, but, they may not be on some large vision or something, but it might just be, I'm just going to make sure that our household is run well. So I'm going to make sure that the trash is taken out, and I'm going to get that person, i.e. my kid, to be the person who takes the trash out. Okay, you're now responsible for taking the trash out, and going down that for 100%, the actual reasons and the why that anybody would listen to that person is due to leadership. But that's whether or not that person has been blessed. I'm not so sure about that. But certainly people who have had, we'll say, moved mountains, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think there's gifting in everybody.
Gifting's the word, yeah.
I think the gifting is there in everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think God is stingy with his gifts, no, except for, 99%, but not you. You can't have a gifting. I don't think he ever dealt that way.
Yeah.
I think he was happy to have them have a gifting. Of course, many of them went astray or went selfishly or self-aggrandizement or something like that. But it's kind of like husband and wife situation. The husband says, I don't dare leave the house because I don't know if you'll do everything I feel led to do. And she'll go, yeah, and I don't want you to leave because I got to ask you. If something happens, I got to ask you.
Yeah.
That becomes an element of distrust and fear, insecurity. That's why husband loves your wives is actually giving her a place and enjoying the place she has. Not saying, you decide to do this with the kid, and I would have done this. And then the argument happens. Well, we have to say, okay, that was good. We have to. So I think leadership with people that are connect and communicate is similar to a relationship with husband and wife in that there's a connection and a communication and a love that's crucial. Swing it over to churches. We've got pastor, assistant pastor, associate pastor, the worship pastor, the music pastor. We got 17 pastors. Who do we listen to? Someone's got to be a leader. And like I said to you before, things rise and fall in leadership. And so leadership has got to have communication and connection and all those other attributes I shared with you, those 8 attributes of accountability, integrity, etc., humbleness, humility. But it's got to be communicated and connected, and you have to have an element of trust. If you don't, you can't leave. If you don't, the leader's gone. What will we do now?
Yep.
And I think that's important to understand.
Did you want to go over those attributes?
We had
leadership
8 of them.
characteristics?
I sent you 8 of them, yeah. And the one is integrity, accountability, obedience, humility, characterized by love. I don't know what word you say for that, so I had to put a phrase in there. Characterized by love is attributes, is characteristic is characterized by love, honesty, faithfulness, and being a servant. And we didn't even get into servant leader.
Yeah. When maybe the word you're looking for is loving.
Loving, basically, yeah.
The person who loves.
Got to be loving, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, some characteristics and actions leaders take, everybody says, that wasn't loving.
Oh, yeah,
And so
yeah.
it's got to be characterized by love, or initiated by love, faith that worketh by love. And an action has to be connected to love.
Well, I mean, we live in an era where everybody's confused love as feminine love.
Or feminine love.
And that's just not the entirety of love by any stretch of the imagination.
Or human love.
If you love your kids and they're about to run out into the middle of the road and get run over by a car, are you going to be like very nicely and doing this? No, you're going to yank their ass. You're going to pull them so hard, you might break their arm.
You might
even scream at them.
save their life.
But that is for sure love. That's not. It's not. I don't know, something else. But do you want to let's go to the first one. Let's talk about that one. In depth.
Integrity.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Integrity.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a shyster, everybody knows what that is when they see it.
Yeah.
If you're what do I call it? Not a crook, but a embezzler or a slanderer. You're underhanded. Mm-hmm. In some way underhanded. I can't trust you. I don't know if he might rip me off. And so integrity has to be seen and known and communicated. And a lot of different levels of integrity in people's minds, but they know that he's not ripping me off. You know when you look at someone that he's got integrity. And that's important. I mean, because trust can't find a place to land. I don't know if I can trust him.
Yep.
So integrity becomes an element where we can trust the leader.
I mean, when I think integrity, I think a person whom they say what they'll do and they'll do what they'll say.
No,
I mean,
that's integrity as well.
Yeah, that it's very clear what it is they're going to do, and that they uphold themselves to that standard, that they have intestinal fortitude to that regard, that they're not going to, like, I've thought about this recently. I was listening to, I don't know, like some like C-SPAN or something. I think it was like C-SPAN. So it was like politicians talking, and they were talking about, I remember what it is now. So do you know Matt Gaetz?
Yeah.
The Florida representative. So he gave like an interview or something, and they were talking about, he's like trying to get some bill passed to like outlaw stock trading by the Congress. And it was really funny because I say funny, but a really interesting thing I had never considered before, which was that he was asked kind of like, do you like AOC and a bunch of these other kind of, far left Democrats, and he likes them and he can work with them. Well, it's not that he likes them. He can work with them. He may not like their policies or anything like that. And the reason is because he felt that they have integrity, that they have a belief in what they're actually saying. And what I found was a pretty profound statement was those people can be persuaded. So if somebody believes in something, they can actually be persuaded. And he says, by comparison, the congressmen who are paid by lobbyists or by corporations or whatever that are beholden to something, they can't actually be persuaded because it's not about persuasion. They've already I'm going to do the thing because I'm being paid.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about that you know, there's definitely like concern that certain politicians are paid by like the Chinese government. And so they're going to very much not be persuaded to do the right thing because they've got some other thing going on.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's probably like the most perfect example of integrity is whether or not some entity is willing to pay for your feelings and values about some subject, and whether or not you're willing to totally give that up.
Yeah. Well, I think Jesus said too that I always wondered about this until I caught it in Revelation. He said, "I would that you were cold or hot." I would have thought he would have said, "I want you hot or lukewarm." But no, he said, "Lukewarm, I'll spit you out."
Yeah.
Because you're neither one. You're on the fence, and nobody can persuade you to get out of there. But the cold can be persuaded, and there was a certain amount of integrity. They were ice cold for Jesus and his way.
See. Yeah.
But later on, they weren't. How did you turn someone cold to be hot? Because they're persuadable. I like that. If that's what he said, Gase. You know,
Yeah, persuade. Yeah, they can be persuaded.
They can be, but they can't persuade somebody lukewarm. He's a fence rider.
I had never considered that before. That what would be the case? I mean, I know that they can be persuaded. That's just how I know these things. But clearly, a lot harder to persuade because you're no longer persuading based on what he's really saying. What he's really saying is he can persuade people by values, and he can't persuade these people by values because they're not being persuaded by values, unless you consider the value of money. I.e., hey. I will pay you more to believe in my values. And that's just not what he's on.
Yeah.
And it definitely made me think that I need to think a little bit more about what would actually persuade people and whether or not somebody's actually a persuadable person.
I think that's integrity. When you talk about cold or hot, you got some kind of, like there's a song that said, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah.
You know, they're standing somewhere.
That's for true.
And they're not falling for anything. If they fall, they were persuaded.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is very true. I mean, let's take AOC, for example. She's not falling for anything. She may have fell for a thing, but not anything. And it comes to mind about this. Actually, this is kind of a good, I think, tie-in of all this, is the parable of the sower. To me, that's like a perfect example where a person who, you know, is on the rocks and they spring up very easily and they totally adopt it. They hear the gospel and immediately they're totally all about it. That person will fade away so fast, it's crazy. They have no rooting. And that is the truth.
Yep.
Whereas if you have fertile soil and you grow, you put down roots and all that kind of stuff, it's there.
Yeah, that I think we just dealt with integrity. You're rooted and grounded,
Yeah.
and established and settled,
Yeah, people know it.
and they know it.
You can look at a tree. That tree ain't going nowhere
Yeah,
unless it gets blown over. But by the winds, it's got to be really extreme for that.
yeah, I think so.
What's next one on your list? What's the next one on your list?
I don't know. What was it? I forgot. I gotta look it up. Who told us that we have to put a code in? Because I have to put a code in. There's another one about integrity, accountability. That's
Accountability.
being accountable, which no one wants to be accountable, including me. I don't want to do something and someone come up to me and say, "Hey, you're doing this and you can't do that, and you better be really rock solid what you're talking about when you tell me I have to be accountable to you."
Oh, yeah.
You got to have some real solid reasons to attack me for being accountable, because that is, again, also an element of trust. And if you're telling me this, I don't trust that. You're trying to put accountability on me that I'm not willing to give. But on the other hand, a leader has to have accountability to some degree. He's not a be-all, end-all island to himself. And if he is, everybody knows in the congregation or the group or whatever, he's the boss, and we understand that, and nobody's to touch it. And I was at a church the other day, and they said he's the pastor, and he decides, and that's it, and we settle it. That's it. I went, oh, okay. I mean, what do you say? You can't say no. He can't. No, it's his group, and that's what they say. Okay, well, he's not accountable to anybody, not even to his organization.
Just hearing something like that makes me want to start poking real hard. I mean, 'cause there's always, that kind of mentality is just super dangerous because there's always somebody bigger. There's always somebody bigger.
Always.
And they're not part of your little group. Like that kind of notion is like there are other groups, and the reality is that a leader does not affect all people. And so if it is just that, and there's somebody outside of that,
which is very important to say that a leader has limitations.
Yeah, for sure.
And they need to know their limitations and not try to go past that line, because what happens is, of course, they went past their boundary that has been allotted to them. It'd be like a pastor trying to go to another church and say, "Yeah, I'm taking over this church too." And they're like, "Who are you?" You know,
that'd be very awkward.
Or he'd say, "Well, I'm of let's say Church of God. Well, I'm of Church of God, so I'm taking over." But yes and no. You can't just take over just because you have the connection of the overseer. You're still given a place.
To me, the rooting of accountability is in the fact that the vision itself, the attainment of it, you have to be accountable to that at a minimum. I.e., you're leading a vision. You are going towards this thing. You have to be, at a minimum, accountable to the entirety of that thing. The entirety.
And to the people.
Yeah.
You know, if you're off getting plastered and committing a crime, I remember telling my church, I said, you know, when I got up today, I kicked the dog, I yelled at my wife, I slapped my kids, I got in a car, I exceeded the speed limit, I had to stop at a red light, and I yelled at someone and cussed them out, and then I ran over somebody and killed them, and I got to church just on time. And I can tell you right now, God's anointed me to give you this message. And people are going, wait a minute, something's not right there. And the problem is that God can anoint you if you're that bad, if he wants to. We have to remember that, because we don't decide, God does. But on the other hand, you just shot everything that gives you integrity and accountability.
I couldn't help but think, would he watching me in my car when I go to church on Sunday?
Yeah, did you do it? Yeah. It's a kicking the dog part that's a bad sign. Because right off the bat, you kick the dog. You know?
The dog. Oh, man.
So I think it's important to know that you're limited. That's a very good, I didn't put that down but that's very important, that you're not the be-all, end-all, island to yourself, self-important, indispensable. Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, not really, because if you die, what are they going to do now? Oh, he was indispensable. What are we going to do now? Something's wrong there. You're not indispensable. And they take themselves too seriously. Leaders take themselves too seriously. It's very hard. I told a pastor this of a small congregation, about 60, 70 people. I said, you take yourself too seriously. And so these people are serving you, literally serving you, doing things, giving you water, making sure you're happy, and making sure, and that's all good. It's nice and serving, but you're so self-important that you allow them to do that. You should say, ho, 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 ho. You guys are going overboard here. I don't need that kind of attention. I want to do that for you and do that for them, but there's that problem where you become self-important, indispensable. I'm the only one that can. Really? That's a new one. And you get that attitude that you're indispensable. Take yourself too serious.
Well, I mean, I definitely know this. I have been indispensable in many, many cases, and I have always felt is a problem. I mean, I know for a fact, like in the technical experiences I've been in, because I'm always like, we'll say at the front, building the things, creating kind of the scaffold.
Yeah.
But the reality is I am dispensable. It's just a matter of time and there's like a cost involved. But it is, and there's consequences for me being disposed, and that would be the case with anybody.
Yeah. Well, it's an
especially
attitude. It's an attitude of mind. It's not that you're not indispensable. In a way you are, but in a way you're not.
Correct.
And if you got it to your head, you miss.
To some level, I mean, it's at some level, because at some level, you are indispensable, but at another level, you are dispensable. I mean, because for sure, like if I was gone, my family, that would be very hard times for them. They will recover to some capacity. Will they have the same trajectory that they would have had beforehand?
No,
probably not.
Probably not.
But I also don't control that, especially in that scenario. I'm not in control of that. Mm-hmm. Other things are in control of that. Yep. So it is what it is. But your point is well taken, because it's the attitude and the mentality of those things.
Yeah.
And you're not going to make good choices.
Here's another one I have is obedient. And what I mean by that is we're all children of disobedience, we're called. We all have this disobedient nature to some degree.
For sure.
So I'm not talking about the fact that I don't have that disobedience attitude or factor or nature at all whatsoever. Well, let's just see how you do. So we have to watch whether he will obey the laws and obey what he's asked to do, and kind of an obedient attitude that I think is important for a leader. Because if he disobeys everything, and no matter what anybody says, no, absolutely not, I'm not doing that, suddenly I can't trust him anymore. Again, it's an example of someone self-willed and took off on his own authority or whatever, and he doesn't have his own authority. Even Jesus said, I don't do this by my authority, I do it by my Father's authority. And so it's important to be obedient, even though that doesn't mean in every little thing. The sergeant can't tell the private, go lay this bomb under this house here, and the sergeant says, my family's in there, I'm not doing that. He has to disobey. I got an attitude of submission, yes, sir, but no, I'm not going to obey there because I can't. It's against my... That's different. There's a place to disobey, but there's also a place to be obedient. And I think you can see that pretty well in a leader. I think most people can see that.
To me, I'm going to just break it down to what I'll call leadership math. It's really simple. If you want people to be obedient to you, you have to be obedient. It's just super simple.
Yeah.
It goes for all of these.
Yeah.
If you want people to have accountability, you have to show being accountable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not accountable.
Yeah.
They will take on every single one of the good and the bad traits of that a leader does, for sure.
It's interesting in our nature that we see where he doesn't line up very quickly. Oh, he's not this. Oh, he's not that. Oh, he's not. What about you? Well, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about this leader. He's not this. He's not obedient. He's not accountable. He's not. It's interesting that our nature picks it up real fast. And then when the thing is turned around toward us, the camera's on us, and we rationalize. And some leaders do that too. And I think the next one is important here about humility.
I'll say what I do in that situation is I normally just change the subject. I just say, let's just get the things done. Let's just go on.
Yeah, but what about the tomatoes? What about change the subject?
I definitely know that I'm much more inclined to draw attention to the let's say the problems that other people have, and then when it falls on mine, I know that they're going on, so I hold myself at least personally accountable. But rather than fall into the trap of let's spend a lot of time talking about it, I just go, let's just get the thing done.
Yep. Well, it said of Jesus, he was meek and lowly, and he had that meekness and that. I don't think meekness is weakness. I just think he was teachable. Yeah. And if you're not humble, you're not teachable.
Yeah, I not really the time for it, but I know I need to look a little bit more into the word meek, Because I know there's more there than just the normal English translation.
Meek is teachable. There's no two ways about it. If you're not meek, you're not teachable. If you're uppity and know-it-all, you're not humble either, but you're not meek either. And so meekness probably should be in there, but it's covered under humility, I believe. Because if you can't be taught something,
Oh.
okay, if you can't be taught anything, why am I teaching? Why am I doing this? And so if you can't be, you got a problem with humility. You're not going to tell me what to do. You're going to teach me to. And that was the trouble with Korah and Moses. Korah said, who are you? I can do what you're doing. Well, Moses said, well, go ahead. Let's see how that works for you. The problem was that God chose Moses. He couldn't exalt himself over Moses because God didn't choose Korah or Dathan. He chose Moses and called Moses. And so you got to deal with that. And Moses, I don't think, was humble until he went through 40 years in the wilderness in the desert.
Yeah.
Humility began to sink in a little bit.
It's a good point. I would definitely say that early Moses very much not humble.
I mean, he was royalty. Who
he probably started, I was thinking about it now, his humble nature probably started at the burning bush.
Oh, yeah. Oh, started, yeah. Started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just denying I don't have the ability to do that, this and that. And like, okay, I'll go do it. But
well, we used to say, I was humble and they gave me a button to wear that I'm humble, but they took it away from me because I wore the button. I am humble. You can't be humble and say I am humble.
Yeah.
You got to be careful about that, So I say I'm more humble than I used to be, but it ain't that much. It's just not that much. I'll be honest with you, but it's not that much.
I will definitely say I do not have any awareness to any level of my humbleness.
Yeah, it's a little hard.
I don't, just to be perfectly blunt, and I know that in some capacities I'm so unhumble that it may try to spill over to other things, but I know things that I know. So if I'm talking to my wife about computers, I'm not going to take anything that you say. It's hard to describe, but they, this is my place versus their place, right? And the ways that I've learned to deal with that thing, technology and computers, is very different than, and I'm not saying that that's been how it's always been, but it is where I'm at now and the progression to where I'm at, that I don't even interpret reality like they do. An example would be
Absolutely.
A regular computer user is going to do. I'm trying to think of a good example here. What most people will do, and I've seen even seasoned developers will do this, is they hypothesize why something happened. So something crashed on the computer, and they will come up, it must be this, and they'll come up with all these possible reasons why it's the case. After doing this long enough, I really don't do that. I just poke the thing until it works. And then I go, I guess it was that. And that's just come from the fact that, maybe that's partially humble. I've been hit so many times that I've been wrong every single time that it's just a waste of time to even say it. Because it's not how you actually go about it anyways. You just poke on the thing, and then you learn information that you didn't know, and then eventually you're like, oh, now it works.
Oh, you're saying that she values something different in a situation like that. She has a different value system.
Kind of. I would say that it's the situation. We're talking about humbleness here. And one of the things that I think people have in this regard is when you're so I've seen a chart of this where if you have how confident you are about something, how your attitude will be. And so if you have no experience with it, you have extremely high confidence. If you have a moderate amount of experience with it, you have no confidence. And then if you have a ton of experience, you have a ton of confidence. It's kind of like a U shape. And I found that. And so when I see somebody who has a lot of confidence and I know they're not a master at the thing, I know they don't know anything about what they're talking about. So you don't need to talk all you're doing is you're actually slowing the whole process by just telling me anything other than what I ask you to reply to me. What is the actual thing that happened? Don't tell me a bunch of all that other crap, because it's just going to take more time.
Well,
and that can be interpreted. My last comment, that can be interpreted as not being humble, but that's not.
Yeah, I think I remember one time somebody told me that didn't know their hand from a tree limb. I mean, they were dumb as rocks, but they came up with an idea about this thing I was thinking about, and I dismissed them and said, "Absolutely, Dad. You don't know what you're talking about. You obviously don't know a lot. You're stupid." Week later or two, I find out they were right. Now I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Because now I'm like, uh-oh. They can't be right, but they were right.
Yeah.
That's really hard. That's no fun. Not to my ego. I don't know about anybody else.
Well, I mean, I definitely know what you're talking about. At least in computers, at this point, I'm so ground down. I don't even care. I'll just take it and move on. But I'm wrong. Because, I mean, I've eventually realized that I'm wrong just by the very nature. And this is like a bigger lesson. It actually applies way beyond computers. It was just something I discovered when I was working on computers that, like, the way computer programming works is, like, you write code and it's got to be in a certain kind of way. And if it's not in that way, it won't even run. It'll be like a syntax error. So you got to go and fix it so that it's just structurally perfect. Perfect. Not almost perfect, literally perfect. Then, at least as defined by a computer. So we'll just leave that. So then that's not good enough. The content has to be perfect too, or close enough to be perfect to fool you to move on to something else, which happens 99% of the time. But what I realize is, okay, say I've got that perfect document. If I hit any key, it's now imperfect. It's now failed. It's now completely incorrect. So as I'm typing, it may go in and out of correctness as it's going, but eventually, as it goes along, it's eventually becoming correct. And what it tells you is that with all things in life, you can't actually do something until you're at the end. Like, you can't actually be correct about the thing. As in, you were literally failing every millisecond until you've hit some. You have now succeeded.
Well, that will kind of humble you.
Yeah, that is the actual reality of it.
Yeah.
And that's where computer's a drug, like programming is a drug, because once you finally get it, you're like, yeah, you're like super excited, and then you sit down for the next 8 hours of getting beat.
Yeah. Well, talking about leadership, when you're not humble and one little teeny thing happens, glitch, whatever, you're all upset. The humility says, hey, let me back up a little bit. I am not perfect, nor do I have everything perfect. This may not be perfect. I think it's perfect, but if it's not, I'm going to have to be willing to say it's not.
Yeah.
That's humility to me. It's a recognition that you're not all that, as I used to say. You know. Yeah. I think we got that down pretty good.
Yeah, I think so.
And the next one is loving, or characterized by love.
Yeah.
And I want to say this really quick, because your definition of loving and my definition of loving, you know, when Jesus said, that whitewashed wall, you brood of vipers, there are people that will say, see, he's not loving. He was love himself. He was love personified. So loving has to be, it's a careful thing, but I do know when someone is loving and when someone is hating. I do know when someone is loving and someone is not loving. I do know that by observation. I'm not sure I know all the details of that, because that wasn't very loving to yank my arm off to save my life out in the street that you're talking about with your kid. Yes, it was loving, but it didn't look like loving.
Yeah.
But you know, so
it is complex, because there can also be love and hate at the same time. And
in their minds.
Well, no, I would say in reality that you can have, for example, with your kids. You love your kids. You don't want them to do something. You know it's not good for them. But in the moment, you're utterly frustrated.
Oh, sure.
You see what I mean? Like
Sure.
you definitely there's that, but then there's all this swirl. Now, in the interpretation of the other person, because that's kind of where you're getting this, the other person, they're going to be getting mixed signals going on.
Totally
there.
different. Yeah.
They're definitely going to be getting mixed signals.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be feeling the hate.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a totally different thing. Yeah. And so when I say loving, the leader has to have some kind of how do I say? You got to watch his actions to know if he's loving, because you're going to know it. You know, if all the people are saying, "Oh, he's not very loving," boom, he's not very loving. I mean, I'm not saying that I judge the man according to all the people in his group, but if everyone says he's not very loving, you kind of have to look at that. You know, you kind of have to say, yeah, maybe he needs to be a little more loving.
I think I've come to the firm conclusion that I need to put a sign whenever I meet somebody that if you find me to be very cold, that's the standard practice. I am unlike many other people, which I feel are very on the surface are very warm, but then they're not so warm on the inside. I'm like the exact opposite. Yeah. So I'm much more cold.
On the outside.
Until I know you, and then it's the exact opposite. Then I will open myself up.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that I'm that way, and it gets me into trouble.
Well, we know that in ourselves, but on the outside, a leader has to be loving. Yeah. I was watching a shepherd lead his sheep across the street in Amman, Jordan, in the middle of downtown. I mean, it was a metropolis. It's a big city, Amman. Yeah. And it was right in fact, it was right in front of the compound of Arafat, back then when Arafat was around. Oh. And he's leading his goats across the property from one property to Arafat's property, and nobody bugged him, which is amazing. I can talk about that for a long time. But each one, as they came across the road, he either hit him on the head, pat him, or, you know, you could tell he wasn't driving them. Yeah. They were following him. And I said, wow, those goats are following this guy. Yeah. And if he was hateful, they would know it.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's how 100%. I look at it.
So why were you in Jordan?
Boy, that's a long story, actually. But I was in Amman, Jordan for ministry with a guy who was his dad and Arafat were playmates as kids. Okay. And his name was Jarius, and I went there to stay with his place because he had a church, rare, in a second-story building near Arafat's compound, well, just about across the street, which was a very going Christian church that he was pastoring. And we went to visit him because his brother was our leader, our what do you call it, guide all through. He's from Jordan, and he took us to Israel and up by the borders of Lebanon and different places, and so, and in and out of the wall there, where it was either Muslim or Jew.
What time of the year was this?
What kind of what?
What time of the year was this?
I think it was April of 90 something. Yeah. Yeah, it was a while ago. So and I was sitting there,
even saying Arafat. I mean, you have to be minimum 35 years old, I think, to know who Arafat is.
Yeah. Yeah, he might have died in the 90s, I think.
I think he died in the late 90s.
Yeah. So it was interesting because the king of Jordan was King Hussein, was his name, and he and Arafat and his dad were playmates together as kids. Huh. Right in the same area of Jordan. So they knew each other that way. As they grew up, they still were friends and tolerated each other because there were a lot of people in Jordan didn't like Arafat. A lot of people did. Yeah. And it was but those guys that were friends and played together, it was not a problem. So as a chance being there, I got to do a lot of things that you wouldn't normally be able to do.
I'd imagine
because so. Andrew and Joyce said, well, my dad is friends with Arafat. Oh, okay. You know, they kind of like had some clout there, you know. Yeah. That was kind of fun. Although, when I was sitting there and this shepherd's coming with goats, 40, 30 of them, I can't remember, 50 of them maybe. These goats are following him. You know, they weren't driven. He didn't have a staff and whack them. They were following him. He probably smelled like them. Because he didn't look.
I mean,
he didn't look too clean.
after raising goats and raising animals, there's definitely a difference. I mean, I've seen it few times having goats, where they were following me wherever I was going to go, versus acting out and going crazy and all that other kind of stuff, causing a lot of hate.
Yeah. I think a leader does take on the scent of the group, of the community.
They have to.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to stink like him a little bit. I mean, because it's interesting. If you take him and put him over here, they're going to go, he doesn't really smell like us, and that's a factor we need to look at.
It's super funny because in my experience in life, I come from my dad was a Marine, I was a Marine. We're like from the suburbs, like that's kind of like where I grew up. And never had like any country experience or anything like that until I was, 26 or whatever. And somehow I started falling into like hippie groups. But I'm very much not hippie. Like I'm just not that kind. I mean, I'm wearing a suit.
Yeah, I was a hippie.
I'm not wearing, Birkenstocks. I don't own a pair of Birkenstocks. I don't want a pair of Birkenstocks. But it's
that would be a yuppie.
A yuppie. I don't know. I've seen some pretty dreaded out people with Birkenstocks. But the point that I was trying to make is there must be to some extent some level of stench that I've had that I picked up that because I feel very comfortable around. I'm not going to say there's a hippie spectrum. And I don't know if I'm perfectly comfortable on the far end of that spectrum, but pretty far into that spectrum. That's my crowd. Far in is like, I'll never forget. There was this, some people that I was becoming friends with in New Orleans. And I was like, hey, there's this land that's for sale that's nearby. And the land was, 20 acres or something like that, 50 acres. And they were thinking about buying it. So they came up and they're like, yeah, the first thing we're this is so non-ironic too, by the way. This is like literally what they said. The first thing that we would do, we'd go up and we'd get a place that we could do a campfire and camp. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. The next thing we would do, we'd put in a composting toilet. That makes a lot of sense. Like the next thing that we would do is we would start having people come over and camp and do a drum circle. It's like, you didn't just say a drum circle, because
I don't even know what that is.
You don't know what a drum circle is?
Is it with drums?
Oh my goodness. No, not usually. It's normally with the bottom of 5-gallon pails, or maybe it's drums. It's just, I'm a little shocked here. Maybe you're old hippie and this is new hippie or something.
We had circles, but they weren't drums. They were, I don't remember all of them.
What they, a drum circle is you get just a bunch of friends together and then you just start going with the beat, man. And you're hitting stuff and it's just this organic.
Oh, we probably did.
You're making music by just banging on stuff.
We did a little bit
just going crazy. You'll go for an hour just beating and batting around.
Yeah.
But I'm just.
Aimlessly.
Yes, very aimlessly. And I was thinking about that and I was like, I don't know if I want them to move next door now. Because I definitely don't want to hear all these drum circles next to my house. Yeah. But somehow I have found myself in continually with people who are that kind of type. And
yeah, did we go over?
What do you mean go over?
Are we over our time?
No, I mean we can go as long as we want to go.
Oh, I thought we were connected to an hour.
No, it's just a general time we might.
I'm cool.
But I don't wear deodorant, so maybe I'm in that. Well,
I want you to know I do, and I'm an ex-hippie. We used to say, hey, we took a shower last month, and we're kind of free like a dog. If we have fleas, it's because dogs have fleas. It's just natural. We used to say that way back when, but that was pretty extreme back then.
That's you're being gross.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have said that unless you.
Yeah, we were. That's why I say a lot of things I don't remember, because we weren't totally sober.
Yeah.
We were a little bit out there. And
so I guess we've gone halfway through your list.
Yeah.
Maybe next week we'll go through the other half.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, these are some characteristics that we touched on I think are important because I think that leaders, we talked about these insecurities that don't have these things because they're insecure. And so there are those people. Now, you have to be careful when you say, I'm one of those people, I have to follow a secure leader. Well, I got news for you. You're following an insecure leader right now, so I wouldn't brag if I were you. I'd shut up if I were you. Because you're following, oh, he's not insecure. Oh, really? Well, I bet I can show that he is. So there are people, I know how to dig it up and find out if they are. I mean, do they have their name out front? Yeah. Oh, well, bingo. You know, there's one reason.
Yeah.
So it's important. You know, you and I know.
I mean, it could make sense. My one counter to that is it could make sense if the name is drawing people, like a famous person. That would make sense to potentially have a name out front, but the name itself would be a thing that would drive people, but not as a branding thing. That
it might be argumentable that because does he really need to have. You know, so I would ask that question.
Maybe not.
And you'd have to get to know the guy to see if he really needs to have his name out there.
Yeah.
You know, so,
but that goes back to what I was saying, kind of alluding to it about the kind of like position mindset. I've just never been a position mindset person. I was kind of born without the ability to see position. I don't really care. I'm just like looking at what are you competent at? What are you capable of doing? Are you striving outside of that? Are you, like who is this person? Position is meaningless to me.
In fact, that's another one about which is down at the end of the list. I didn't add to it, but striving is a big deal. If the guy is striving, I got a lot of references in Scripture to that because we were supposed to wear linen ephods way back, the priests were, and not sweat. And we used to say when we were in Bible school, and there was all kinds of leaders everywhere saying, well, if he's sweaty, he's not a good leader. There's something wrong. If he's sweating when he's preaching, there's something wrong. And I used to say, some of the most anointed guys I know were sweating.
Yeah.
And so we say...
Obviously, what there must be saying is about...
They're striving.
Yeah.
They're striving about something.
Well, when you say striving, what do you mean exactly?
Well, I just think if there's a strife in his life that he's striving to be a leader, striving to be in charge,
I see.
Then there's something wrong there. And you can tell when someone's striving. You and I know a pastor that's out there parking cars before church starts. He's not striving. He's just kind of...
sure.
He's being himself. And I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good quality. It's not a bad quality. It's a good quality.
No, he's actually set him out very strategically, by the way. I think I've heard somebody say something about it, and I was like, dude, he literally gets to meet and face every single person that comes in. What are you talking about? People don't even have to know. And in fact, until recently,
most people don't know who he is.
Until he became the pastor, I assumed he was the leader of the church.
No.
Of course, it's like, dude, I know you. You know everybody. You're out influencing everybody. I assume you're the leader of this church.
Yeah, that's not striving.
No, that's not.
That's a little bit of comfortability. Now he's not comfortable in everything. Because I've been doing this a long time, and I see certain things he's not comfortable in. But that is a comfortability that I like, I admire.
Sure.
And it's integrity. It's open. He's communicating. He's connecting. And so we're happy to have that happen.
You know, it's funny thinking about this. I'm like, well, what are some of the things that I'd say I'm probably not that I would have to strive to do? And my mind immediately went to like running a meeting, and I'm sitting there wondering, like, well, why is that the case? And I think part of it is I am much better at making passionate arguments than I am like organizing and like being structured.
Actual organizing.
Yeah, so I can't. That's not my.
That's why we need people with a
value.
Gift. We need people with that gift.
Yes.
If you don't have that gift, let the person with the gift. And this again is that leader who's not insecure to let you go with your gift.
Yeah.
And Jesus was not insecure about that either.
I'll tell you what, my perfect world, my ideal world, is I don't do anything. The only reason why I do anything is because certain things aren't getting done.
Yeah, well, I had to learn that. I didn't get that normal.
But I mean, one day maybe I'll end up at that state, but we're not there yet. There's a lot of stuff that's not happening. It's that leadership void, right? Are you trying to get in there and fill the void? Because some voids, there's not a void. Like the guy I was talking about at work, the process manager, he's the best I've ever worked with. And does that mean he's the best ever? No, but he definitely holds that role very, very well. I could not be more appreciative of him to run the thing, because I had seen in the past somebody in that same role, they would drop doing that so that they could be a guardian, or not a guardian, a gladiator in the meeting, right? So I eventually realized you got to choose one or the other. You're either going to orchestrate the meeting, you're going to be like the person who goes, because you have certain kind of powers. We're not going to talk about this. We're going to hold this. We're going to move to the next thing. You can't say that if you're a gladiator on the battlefield.
If you're an insecure leader, you'll try to control it.
Correct.
Whenever way you can. Well, let's not do that. Let's do this because and he knows that he's in charge. He's in control.
Yes.
Good luck with that.
He's a person who's orchestrating the meeting. If all they do is focus on that, back to the integrity, they have integrity because the only time they're going to bring up their voice is when they need to move the meeting along. That's very different when somebody's now getting impassionate towards an argument, or about what should happen, this, that, or the other. You lose the ability to actually have that, because how do I know you're not trying to win the argument by just bypassing the argument? You can't know that. So
I would say to people listening to us, is your leader accountable, integrity, delegating authority, not threatened if someone else is running the show? He's a leader, but he's able to allow those with giftings to do what's in their gifting. He doesn't have to have all that, his finger in every pie. Is it important? Is it important to have the title and to say that title out loud to people so that we all know that he's got that title, and nobody even So look at the leader. If you got a leadership vacuum, it's going to be in these areas, the cause of it, because people are not going to follow an insecure, to the degree, an insecure leader. Some follow insecure leaders because they're in the mode, they're in the technique, they're in the methodology of what's going on. That's good enough for us for an hour every week. But there's a little bit more to it than just leading people for an hour a week. There's a little bit more involved in someone's catching the vision, and we have this catch the vision on our thing. Someone's catching it and saying, hey, this is the way we're going to go. This is the way he's going. We're going that way. And if you can't really say that, and you can't say that without him, because he's not indispensable. If you are, well, I got to have that leader. If I don't have that leader for good, I can't. Now we're resigned to say no. We got to have him, and he's indispensable. If all these things are existing and you're dealing with them, you're not happy. Let's be honest. If you're not happy with that situation, or you settled for a second, third rate, fourth rate, you settled for something less, then you have a vacuum, and you need to pray about it. That's all we're saying. All
right. Well, I think that's our time. That makes a lot of sense. That's quite the summary, I'd say.
I've had some fun touching with some of this content.
Yeah, this was good. Certainly, if you've got any comments or questions, put them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, especially if you were, you've caught something. We definitely want to hear that kind of stuff.
Yes, please, because we're both going to kill ourselves if you don't say that we got something. I mean, we don't just spin our wheels.
I am that insecure.
Amen.
But all right, we'll see you next time. We're basically doing this every single Friday at 11 o'clock. Push or pull a few minutes based on getting all of our stuff set up. But 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, that's when we run this podcast. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mike.